On this episode of Narcissist Apocalypse, we talk with an abuse survivor named Betty. And Betty was in a polyamorous relationship with a controlling narcissist. It's a story of lifestyle boundaries, word salad, and deriving your worth from within. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, a podcast that gives a voice to survivors of narcissistic abuse. I am Brandon Chadwick, but my friends call me Chad, and thanks for tuning into this episode. So what is a narcissist, you may ask? Well, for the purposes of this podcast, we refer to a narcissist as anyone who has displayed a pattern of behavior that shows a limited capacity to appreciate others' perspectives. It is that simple. And now, before we get to our episode with Betty, I just wanted to thank everyone in the Narcissist Apocalypse community for listening to the show and sharing your thoughts by email, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. A big reminder, if you have not left us a review on whatever podcast service you use, Spotify, Apple, Google, Stitcher, CastBox, etc., please leave us a 5-star written review as it helps out our show when it comes to rankings. Now, if you haven't been to our website recently, you should go there. Why? If you want to be part of our show, that's where you actually go to sign up. We have a guest form there at narcissistapocalypse.com. You fill out that guest form, and away we will go from there. And the quickest way, though, to be part of our show is to also go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com and read a letter to your narcissist and be part of our Letters to Our Narcissist compilation episode. We have a voicemail recorder on our website, so go to narcissistapocalypse.com. It's on the right side of the page, and there's a button there that's always floating around. It's hard to miss. It says send voicemail. Press that button and record up to, I think, 5 minutes. You can record up there, but if you need more than 5 minutes, record up to 10. Just press it a second time. Press it a third time. Do 15. We are accumulating these letters to have a volume 3 of our Letters to My Narcissist episode. So send those voicemails in. And if you want me or my old pal Melissa to read your letter instead, just send it to narcissistapocalypse@gmail.com. Other things that are going around on our website. Yes, we're back to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com/courses. We are offering high conflict parenting courses, and we have partnered with an online parenting company called Online Parenting. And many of their courses were created by Bill Eddy. And if you have listened to our episode last year with a divorce lawyer named Helen, you'll know that Bill Eddy is an expert in dealing with these high conflict people in court. And now he's helped create many parenting courses to help you through divorce and to help support your children too. These courses are the most widely recognized courses by family courts across the country. So if you want to support the show and are looking for guidance, please do go to narcissistapocalypse.com/courses. What else do we have here on my list? Oh, we have a new podcast. Narcissist Apocalypse Q&A is now available for your listening pleasure, where we talk to therapists and coaches about narcissistic abuse. And if you're looking for a therapist or a coach like the ones on our Q&A podcast, please do go to abusetherapy.org. And if we don't have someone in your area on our directory, please let us know, and we will help find someone for you. Using abusetherapy.org helps support the show. But do you know what else helps support the show? Our Patreon. Yes, we started a Patreon. If you want to hear episodes that never made it to air, follow-up episodes with former guests, and much, much more, join our Patreon. We'll be releasing new content on there every week, so to help support the show, become a patron of our Patreon at patreon.com/narcissistapocalypse. And we also started an Instagram and a YouTube channel and started making fun pop culture narcissist-based videos. So go check those out on our Instagram or YouTube under Narcissist Apocalypse. This week on both of them, I made a video called The Codependent Tree, which was based upon the book by Shel Silverstein, The Giving Tree. I had my own little twist. Some people think it's a little bit uplifting at the end. Some people think it's sad. But it's got generally pretty good reviews. So go check that out. And that is it, everyone. It's time for me to get out of my way and your way. Here is my conversation with Betty. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. This week with us, we have Betty. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing well. And for everyone who is listening, this show, we're going to talk about a different lifestyle. The BDSM lifestyle becomes a big part of this episode. And I know there are a lot of people out there who've gone through their narcissistic abuse relationships. And even though it wasn't a BDSM lifestyle, a lot of us have had to, be part of a sexual lifestyle that our partners wanted us to be a part of. And today we're going to be talking about a consensual lifestyle that both people wanted to be a part of, but then there's a different dynamic within that of like, when does that world end and the other world begin of work life and how lines can be blurred and going along with things. Everything can be very confusing. So this is going to be a really interesting episode, and I can't wait to unfortunately, I can't wait to hear Betty's story. So without further ado, I'm going to get out of my way and your way. And Betty, the floor is now yours.
Thank you. So I kind of want to start from before the relationship started, just because it is kind of relevant. So I got married very young. I got married at 20 years old, and I was actually divorced by the time I was 23. That's not the narcissist, but it is important because I kind of met the narcissist through my ex-wife and kind of through the breakdown of my previous marriage. It was no fault of my ex-wife. It kind of we just didn't really love each other the correct way, and we went through a lot of therapy that just didn't work. But the biggest thing is I did meet my ex, Jessie, through her. Once upon a time, she actually was my ex-wife's boss, which sounds kind of crappy, but she was only her boss for a couple of months, and afterwards they became friends, and Jessie would kind of come over every once in a while to, drink with us, a couple of parties that we hosted at our apartment or so, and I didn't really see Jessie again for about a year and a half, but I remember her being very confident, very sure of herself. That was really attractive to me. My ex-wife was a paramedic as well as my narc, but they worked together in the paramedic field. And when my ex-wife started getting more and more into her career, she started having more overnight on the ambulance. So I was alone a lot of nights, especially Friday nights. And I started having parties, hosting parties for myself, just like with some friends to drink, because I had developed a bad habit to drink by myself, and I learned that that was probably not a good thing to do. So at one of these particular parties, I invited Jessie because I remember her being really fun to drink with. So she came that night, and we kind of realized that night that we were attracted to each other. I do want to preface by saying we never, ever did anything. We didn't kiss. We didn't do anything before I left my wife. And I also want to say I didn't leave my wife for her. It just kind of happened at the same time. But the reason why I think that's relevant is because Jessie kind of found me in this perfect emotional turmoil that I was when I was realizing I was trying to leave my wife, and I was realizing that I was going to be alone, and there was a lot of feelings attached to it. And I think because I was so enmeshed in that, it was easier for Jessie to kind of slip in and be like the savior. She got a lot of pride from being the person that someone can lean on. She was the one that lifts everybody up. But I remember she was just so sure of herself, and she had such a powerful presence. Like, anybody can see it. One of my best friends, I remember them meeting and him just saying, God, she's intoxicating, because she is. She's incredibly intoxicating. she is as close to a man as you can get without the hardware. She's very masculine, stands very tall, definitely has the muscles. I remember just being very attracted to, like, that persona, which I later learned that wasn't really her persona, just the one that she put on. But we've had a very whirlwind romance from the beginning. Where our first date was a week after I left my ex-wife. And I remember it being very, almost like kismet. I was like, oh my God, maybe this was meant to be, and the process of it was very, very fast. She learned, I had told her I had never been to a concert before. So in that next month, I went to 2. She took me to Chicago, and we had a wonderful time out there, and she would get expensive hotel rooms, and we'd go to nice dinners, and, we'd do the concerts, and it would be people that I wanted to see, and it was so other than what I've experienced before, because my ex-wife was very unfeeling, unpassionate person, and I wasn't used to that kind of life, just spending money and going out and dressing up really nice. And I felt I felt seen for the first time in my life. It was super important to me to feel seen, because I felt like I had just been sleepwalking for the last 4 years. And for every day to be different, for every day to be experiencing something different, it was just like I was awake, And that's kind of...
What were the biggest qualities that you liked being seen for?
I like being seen as, I'm a very compassionate person. I'm a very empathic person. I think for me, like, I am very much a codependent, so I tend to attach myself to people that are larger than life for me, and I can feel like who they are as a person. And in the beginning, I really did see who she was as a person, the person that was underneath the bad parts. But I like to be seen as kind of like that caring person and a sexual person and a passionate person. Like, I like to be seen as that, because that's who I feel like I am, And
did she know that? Could she notice that right away and honed in on all of those things? And did she verbally point all of those things out?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's important actually to point out she was in a polyromantic relationship at the time that we met. She had been with her partner for 6 years at that point, and the biggest thing that we bonded on was when I was leaving my ex-wife. She bonded with me over that because our partners seemingly were the same person. They were both very unfeeling, both very unsexual. Neither of us, felt seen in our relationships. Neither of us, we were both very passionate people. We both felt everything. We'd listen to music and we'd feel it in our chests, or we'd read poetry and we'd cry. We were both very passionate people. And I know she very much mirrored me at that point, and I can tell that now. But I just felt so like I had never met somebody like me before. I've never been seen as that person who has a high sex drive, or that is very passionate about poetry and music and theater. So that was very important for me to have found.
And she was in, or I'll use the word, the name Jessie. Jessie was in a polyamorous relationship. But was the other person really involved in it, or it was really for Jessie's purposes only?
It was absolutely just for Jessie's purposes. Okay. And I feel horrible about the way that we entered it, because although poly, I completely 100% respect poly relationships. I think if they're done healthy, they've done beautifully. But the thing with Jessie is she wasn't really in it to be in a poly relationship. She just wanted to be satisfied in any way that she could. And the biggest thing with her ex-partner, they'd been together for 6 years, and she saw her ex-partner as lazy and didn't ever want to have sex with her and wasn't interested in the BDSM part, and, you know, there's all these faults of hers, and, you know, as you do, you play into it. And I thought of her as this, well, she was just like my ex-wife, so she must just be, you know, whatever. And so I do feel bad about it now. I have since then made amends with this ex-partner. But the way that we entered the poly part of her relationship was completely and 100% wrong. Because in a poly relationship, there are boundaries, there are set boundaries that both partners agree on, whether it's one person that finds another partner or they both do. The biggest thing is boundaries, you know. So there's like kind of a set of rules. And the thing with her and her ex-partner was before we had sex, I had to get a STD test. I didn't do that. Before we started truly dating, we had to meet. I didn't do that. You know, before she had to know when we were going on dates, we didn't do that. So I feel absolutely horrible about the way we entered it. But that, I do want to say, is the wrong way to enter a poly relationship. The first time that she knew about one of our dates was about 3 months in. And we had already, you know, we were already in love, and she was at my house more often than she wasn't, you know, because she had, at the time we met, Jessie had 3 jobs and her other partner. But in between that, she was still at my apartment, you know, 3-4 nights a week. So, one, that's completely imbalanced when it comes to a poly relationship, and 2, pretty unacceptable. But again, I was really new to all of it, and I also I played right into her hand, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I am very ashamed of that part of my story because I should have known better, but I mean, it's hard to not blame yourself, especially in this kind of relationship. But yeah, so the first few months we moved very quickly. You know, we were in love. We were together all the time. We had a lot of sex. I mean, we were very much in love. And, the love bombing was wonderful. You always wish that part stays, but of course it never does. But after about 4 months is when I started seeing the red flags and kind of just dismissing them. It started off with little things. Like, I remember the first time she got mad at me was, she was on her way over. She was coming off of a shift, off of a 24-hour shift, and I think I was supposed to do the dishes or something. And I didn't. I stayed asleep, and I woke up too late or whatever. And, you know, I remember her coming home and being so mad. And it was the first time that she had ever been mad directly at me. And she kind of just didn't say anything, and she slammed into the kitchen and, you know, did the dishes really loudly and slammed the dishwasher closed and came back in and stayed quiet. And I sat there and I kind of waited it out, you know, and we talked about it, and she apologized, and she's like, sorry. Her reasoning was because her partner at home was very messy and didn't do the dishes and didn't clean up after herself, that, you know, when she came to my place, she just wanted to feel comfortable. And, you know, in order for her to feel comfortable, it had to be clean. And that was kind of just how it started. It was just like it was very small things at first, like very nitpicky. But I remember we would talk about, you know, the psychological problems or whatever that she had. Like, she had control issues and she had anger issues, but I had never experienced them. So I thought maybe, you know, I can just help her with the little parts, and she, you know, she would feel like she was getting a hold on them. And it was never really directed at me at the beginning, just in tiny doses, you know. And it was very small things like that, very small, like adjustments, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But her life started kind of compounding a lot after that 4 months. And she was feeling a lot of pressure at work, and she was feeling a lot of pressure at home, and she was feeling a lot of pressure with her friends. A lot of things started compounding, and that's kind of when the mask started slipping. And after I broke up with her, I remember thinking I should have left her in May, which was 5 months And 5 months in, two big things happened. So the first one was she, up until then, we said that we were in an open relationship, because, she had her partner, and I was still, I wasn't sleeping with anybody. I was mostly just kind of going out with friends and whatever. If I, kissed somebody, if I made out with somebody, I just did, because we were in an open relationship. And every time that I would tell, I think it happened like 4 or 5 times. Each time that I would tell her that I had kissed somebody, because we were full disclosure, I told her, I was upfront about it, because that's what you do in an open relationship, because that was our boundary. But every time that I would tell her that I kissed somebody at the bar, each time, like, it would be progressively more aggressive of a response from her, and it was, at first, was kind of backhanded. Like, on her social media, she'd say something, I knew it was about me, like little things like that, and I would bring it up, and she'd be like, well, you should have known better. It's like you're cheating. I was like, no, I'm not cheating, because this is our boundary. This is what we have agreed on. These are our agreements. And I stayed really firm with it, because I told her after the second or third time, I was like, well, listen, if you don't like when I exercise my rights in our relationship, change the boundary, because at that point, I wanted to be monogamous, because I realized I have a little bit too much jealousy for an open relationship, and so does she. And she would always say, well, that's not fair, you're free, you're this. But I would be like, well, I'm not really, because every time that I do it, it's an attack on me. Because in the beginning, I was very self-aware. Before everything shifted, I was very aware of, what was right and what was wrong that she was saying or doing. And I would explain it, she'd blow up, and then she'd come back, apologize, and change behavior. So I was like, all right, this is how a relationship works. But that 5th month in May, one of the biggest things was I did end up kissing somebody else. I don't know, with someone at a bar. Literally just kissed them. And she freaked out, like completely freaked out on me. And she was like, well, I've had the chance to do something before and you didn't. And I didn't. I held my composure. I didn't do something that I could have done to hurt you. So the fact that you're doing it shows that you don't respect me, or that you don't really love me. And I was like, well, that's not true. It was just kind of one-sided. Like, it was impossible to get my head around. And so that last time that it happened, she was like, well, I guess I'm just going to go out and sleep with everything that moves. And I'm like, well, that would be your right within this relationship. That's what the boundary is. If you want to change it, then change it. Because I'm all for being monogamous, but if you can't handle it, you can't handle it. And she just freaked out. And so the next couple of days, she was like, well, you have to tell me where you're going before you go, and tell me when you get there, like text her, even if she wasn't at the house. And I remember the next day, she was still really mad at me. And my stepdad called me to pick him up and drop him off back at home, to pick him up from work, and drop him off at home. And, it was a half an hour there, half an hour to his house, and then half an hour back to my house. And I decided I didn't need to tell her where I was going, but she called at one point, and she's like, where are you? And I said, well, I'm in the car. I'm about to go pick up my stepdad, which was a lie, because I was already there. But I backtracked to kind of make up for the fact that I didn't say anything. And she's like, well, tell me when you didn't tell me when you left. And I was like, I'm sorry, I'm leaving right now, and I set alarms so that at each half hour I could text her, oh, hey, I'm here, or oh, hey, I made it there, so that they would line up with where I was going. And I remember thinking, well, this is kind of screwed up, but, she's mad, I understand, whatever. So each half hour, when I actually had my stepdad and I was at his house, I texted that I had just picked him up. Or when I was leaving his house, I said that I just got to his house, so it was things like that. And it was a really tense situation. And I remember my mom being like, that's not quite right. I'm like, I know, but it's just how she is. I just brushed it off.
So you're being heavily kind of controlled by these actions. You're doing these. It's like you have a parole officer.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to her making, you're in this polyamorous relationship. You make out with people here and there. She's making you feel guilty. In my mind, while listening, I'm assuming that she's probably doing this with other people, but she's not saying anything. Am I correct?
I think so. She never came clean about it at that point, but I feel like she probably was.
Yeah, like, 'cause it just in my mind, it's like there's just like she's allowed to, you're not allowed to, but she might not. I guess I'm jumping to conclusions, but she's probably not saying anything, so she can still grill you about it.
It's a very wishy-washy situation in the beginning. I couldn't tell you if she was or wasn't, because she was spending a lot of time with me, but I wouldn't put it past her.
Okay. I apologize to everyone for stepping in there. I was just really curious.
No, you're fine. But so that was one of the first big things that I kind of just wrote off. The second one was actually a week later. For that whole week, she was very, icy towards me. She didn't really say much. She was very short with her responses, and she wasn't really at the house very often. And that weekend, we were supposed to spend the whole weekend together, and I was kind of worried because I remember, she was so upset with me. How was the weekend going to go? And that Friday, she called because she was with friends, and she was coming to my house from there. And she called me that day, and I remember her being in such good spirits. And I was like, oh, my God, I think we might have a good time. She was in a good mood. She had a great time with her friends, and she was coming over, and we were going to have the weekend. And she sounded so happy about it, So I remember thinking, all right, this is going to be great. And that night, I was waiting for her to come over. She was only 35 minutes away, but after 2 hours, she still wasn't there. And, I called her friends, and they're like, yeah, she left at that time. We found out that night that she ended up getting arrested for a DUI, which actually ended up being a crap DUI. She really wasn't drunk, and she really wasn't on anything. But she is brown in a very small southern Illinois town, and it was kind of act first, think later. Mm-hmm. We ended up getting it thrown out because it was absolutely inaccurate. But either way, that just kind of added to her pile of everything's horrible. And after that night, I think she felt like she lost a lot of control from the DUI. And I realized that she was exerting that control on me more. So that weekend she was, for the first time in our relationship, so extremely controlling. She'd had, little things, like with the dishes or with, little things. But that weekend, it was so present, and I remember so clearly pretty much the whole weekend. Because that next day, we went over to a friend's house just to hang out for a little bit, and I remember nothing I did was right. The things that I said were corrected. The things that I did were corrected. I don't know, maybe I had one glass too much, or I wasn't sitting the proper way, or maybe you shouldn't say that in front of my friends. Just little things like that, and it was just pretty constant. And I remember looking at our friends and being like, you see this, right? And it was just, I felt like I was so, invisible. And the next day, we had a party at our house with those friends and a couple of more. And I remember, again, it was just continuing on. Everything I did was wrong. And at one point, the air conditioning wasn't working right. And she, yelled down the hall, well, did you pay the bill? And, they were watching the TV, so clearly I paid the bill. At the end of that night, I was drunk and brave. And after everybody was asleep, we kind of we got into it. And I just remember yelling, I'm not going to sit here and be corrected all the time. I deserve better than that. I was standing up for myself, for the fact that the last 2 days were just basically a beating on me. And up until that point, I had not experienced that, and I knew that I didn't deserve that. And, you know, we were like, screaming at the top of our lungs.
So in a way, you know, for the previous 2 days, you're being nitpicked. Your value is kind of being put down, like, I guess, in the sense of like when someone says, like, did you pay the bills in front of in front of other people? You know, you're being put down as if you're not responsible, if you're not taking care of your life, and that maybe your life might be a mess in certain ways. And these little things are happening to you, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Just to clarify for everyone that all these things are going on, and you're just on the receiving end. And as soon as you step up to the plate to join in, boom, it's not accepted. And just not accepted, you're probably being painted to her friends in a light that's just not true.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I did have one of the friends kind of come up to me because they were originally her friends that we hung out with. And I do remember talking to one of them and her being like, yeah, no, I see what's happening, you know, but she is under a lot of pressure. She is, you know, kind of going through that DUI thing, and you know how she is with her other partner. And so she saw what was happening, but she also explained it the same way that I did, you know. And it was both affirming and denying of how I was feeling. But in the beginning, I kind of went back over text before I deleted them after the breakup. And in the first half of our relationship, because we were together for a year, 364 days, but in the first half of our relationship, I did stand up for myself when I felt like it really warranted it. You know, I would say something like, oh, hey, you know, maybe that's not right. You know, I think that's one of those negative behaviors that you have. Or, like, I was not constantly vocal, but when I felt that something had gotten out of hand, I would say something. And I think that weekend was probably the last time I really truly did that. When I exploded at the end of that last night, I just went off, you know. And after that, after that, she switched tactics. But I remember that day after that big blow up, that morning, she woke me up kissing my entire body, you know, apologizing, and then saying, you know what, why don't we try being exclusive? So in order to kind of dismiss all of the stuff that she knew she was doing to me, she gave me something that I wanted, which was to be exclusive, other than her other partner. Because up until that point, we were allowed to, you know, mess around or see other people. But with this new arrangement, it would be just me and her other partner. Because the other partner preceded me, and I didn't feel I had the right to say anything about that. And she stopped being as controlling and as nitpicky, and she seemed like she was back to normal. And for the next couple of months, we kind of went, there was, you know, highs and lows, pretty dramatic highs and lows. But I had gotten the verbal agreement of what I wanted, so I felt I didn't have as much room to complain about some of the smaller things because I got what I wanted, you know. And so within those next couple of months is kind of when we started getting into the BDSM and kink community, which she was already kind of established in, but she was still kind of just dipping her toes in before me. And there's a retreat 2 times a year that she started going to, and she decided to bring me, which was a really big deal. You know, it's a 4-day retreat in a private campground, and there's a lot of like-minded people, and it's very truly the community. And I remember when I did go, I loved that part of it, that everybody was there for, you know, with the same purpose of sorts. And it was a very accepting place. It was it's very heavy on consent. There were people that were in charge of making sure that there was consent with any kind of scene that they were doing. The fantastic body positivity. Clothes were optional. It was a wonderful kind of retreat, you know. And yes, there was things of sexual nature, of course, but just like the overall community, I loved that part. And there were classes, like classes on little aspects within the community. There was a class on the psychology of BDSM, actually. There was a class on, say, breath play or on rope and stuff like that. And it was very informative. And each of these classes were taught by people that either had some kind of degree that was relevant, or had a certain amount of years experience, or, they were credible, if that makes sense. So it was a wonderful, wonderful place to go. And I would absolutely love to do it again if I wouldn't see my ex there. But either way, we started getting into the community more. And before that retreat, we actually, for I would say like 2 weeks beforehand, we were fighting a lot, about little things. And she realized that I was never going to be what's referred to as a 24/7 submissive, which is somebody that is a complete submissive both in the bedroom and out. So this person would be, and it would be agreed upon what the actual parameters were, but a 24/7 sub would be essentially a submissive 1950s kind of style person all the time. And I was very clear on the fact that I was never going to do that. And she said, well, that's the impression that you gave. And I said, I never gave that impression to you. I was never going to do that. And we had this argument a couple of times before we went to the retreat. And within those arguments, she realized that I wasn't going to be this person that she built me up in her head to be, which was eventually going to be a 24/7 submissive. And I remember telling her that I lost every sense of my identity in my marriage that I had had. I lost everything about me that made me who I was, and I said, I'm never going to do that again. She would make sure that I knew, oh, no, you're not going to lose yourself, you're not going to lose yourself. But it's like, how can you not? So within those arguments, I think she realized that she had to switch tactics, which is kind of when that happened, when that switch kind of went off in her brain. And that's kind of when the gaslighting got even worse. And that was the biggest thing with the gaslighting. It started slowly, but at that point, looking back, I can see how it changed. And the thing that she did, and I called her on it a couple of times throughout the relationship, but she always denied it. But what she would do is we'd start a discussion or an argument on one topic. And I would be, arguing my side of that topic, and then she would switch the topic. And she, instead of talking about maybe what she had done wrong, she'd switch it to something else that had happened, a couple of weeks ago. And then she'd switch to something that I did, or she'd switch it 3 or 4 times within that argument, to where by the end of it, I didn't even know what I was arguing for anymore. And by the end, I was just so completely confused as to what my original point was, that it must have just been irrelevant at that point. And she would do that often. Every time we'd argue, it would be like that. And I just remember being so confused all the time. Like, I remember I started questioning my own thoughts, because I was like, well, is that actually true, or is that just something that I thought? And that's kind of when the gaslighting really hit full force. And she also, she would switch her point of view a lot. Like, say she would be for one situation. Oh, what is an example? I couldn't think of one, but say she would be on one side of the argument, but then by the end she'd be on the other side, and basically being like, see, I agree with you, so I don't know why you're arguing in the first place. So it was just little things like that, and that was constant. So we argued a lot.
So when she did those arguments where she would agree with you at the end, she was just doing it to argue. She was just doing it to argue.
She was doing it.
She wasn't trying to get in those cases. She wasn't trying to get anything specific. She was just literally doing it to argue with you and just create confusion.
Yes, I think for that purpose, it was kind of to confuse me into thinking that I didn't understand what she was saying.
And,
like I had misinterpreted
and then to reinforce at the end, see, I do agree with you. Is that kind of what, I am listening to you. I am agreeing with you. Is that kind of what was going on?
Absolutely.
Okay.
After arguing for the last hour, she would basically be like, no, I agreed with you the whole time. You just heard something different.
Mm-hmm.
It was extremely convoluted.
So now that you're going through like all of these arguments and these gaslighting situations, where are you mentally with all of this? Like, are you comfortable in the relationship? Are you questioning things anymore? Are you tired? What
at that point,
and at that point is like she's starting to get more of what she wants because you're tired, if that's happening?
She absolutely. So the biggest thing during that point, that was right before we went to, it started right before we went to the retreat, which I think was a tactic so that I would be confused so that she could get what she wanted. So through that confusion, she could then create a pocket for her to do what she wanted. But for me, I was still pretty clear. I was starting to get tired and I was starting to get worn down, but I was still pretty clear. And I remember thinking, I don't know if I'm going to go on the retreat because I don't know if we can do this together. Like, I don't know if this relationship is going to work, because I'm clearly not what she wanted. I'm clearly not what she envisioned for us. But also I was just so angry, like I would be like, I don't know how you got, say, this argument from what I just said, but that was not what I said. And I just remember being so tired. And I didn't know if I was going to go on the retreat until 2 days before. And we went to our retreat. And it was actually a wonderful time that we had. And the reason we fought on the way home was because while we were at the retreat, the night before we left, because we left about noon the next day. The night before we left, there's this huge bonfire where everybody goes to and you can burn things, and it's a very freeing experience. And at the burn, she was down at the fire doing her thing, and I was sitting on the blanket and talking to one of the friends that I had made there. There was this guy. And she was coming back from the fire, coming towards us. And I told this gentleman, I said, hey, that's her seat. Why don't you stand up and kind of show a sign of respect? Because that's a really big thing in the community is respect for the Dom. And I told him, because I wanted to show that he had respect and that I had respect. It was what she wanted. I wanted to show that we were doing what she wanted. And, he stood up as a sign of respect. They nodded. He went off. And, Jessie was very, had her chest puffed out and was very, very proud of that. And I was like, all right, I did it right. It was a good thing. The next morning, we were about to leave, and I made the stupid mistake of telling her that I had told him to show respect. Because I wanted to show her that I understood the dynamic and that I understood what was expected, in that environment. And she got so mad at me because I shouldn't have had to tell him he should have done it on his own. And why would you tell him that that's not your place? And at first I was like, no, I think that, that should have been fine. I did what I should have done, but by the end of that car ride home, I was convinced that I did the wrong thing. And I was convinced that it was absolutely not the thing I should have done. And how could I dare, and that's kind of that. I remember, I remember just being so sure at that point that I was in the wrong. And that's kind of when I started believing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you're starting to believe these kernels of truth within the lies that are being told to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then it kind of just went from there. After that, the micromanaging got worse. And it was little things that compounded. You know, I was told how to brush my teeth, how often to brush my teeth, the correct way to wash my hair, what I should and shouldn't wear. And it was all very small things that were littered throughout. But then by the end, I was doing them on my own because I'd been told so many times. So she didn't have to tell me. So it wasn't as present. But I was still starting to do all of these things just to keep the peace. And I don't know. And I remember thinking about it every once in a while. But she did keep me very confused. Those next few months, I was just kind of like, well, this is just how it is, you know. And she made it so that she was like she knew what was best. Because, you know, I wasn't raised, I wasn't taught proper dental hygiene, and I wasn't taught the right way to clean. And I came from a very poor family. And the way that she presented it, you know, she did know best. You know, so I guess, yeah, that is the right way to brush your teeth. You know, this is how often I have to brush my teeth. Or, you know, maybe I should do the dishes this often. It was little things like that just compounded and made me believe that, no, I really did kind of come from not the greatest upbringing. And she is just trying to help. And, you know, I'm just trying to keep her comfortable, you know.
Yeah, she's using these kernels of truth that she knows to control you, and your life in the BDSM community and the life that you didn't want to lead, which was being a 1950s style 24/7 sub, has now bled over the edges into the reality of your everyday life.
Exactly.
Did you notice that at the time that is what has happened, or are you just at this point walking in a state of like a fog of fear, obligation, and guilt?
It kind of went back and forth. I was aware of it, but I wasn't aware that that I was starting to become a 24/7. But I was aware of the fact that she was becoming more controlling, and I would I would challenge that every once in a while. But it didn't really come to fruition. You know, I would just apologize and back off, you know. And I remember, like, that point of time, it was kind of sleepwalking, almost. She was just, but the thing is it wasn't all bad, which is, in this kind of relationship, it's not, you know. And I remember when there were highs, it was just incredibly high highs, you know, and we still had regular sex, which for me was a big deal because in my marriage, I didn't have any. So that was also another way that kind of kept me quiet, I think, because I was getting what I thought I wanted, you know. So in order for me to be getting what I wanted, I had to at least give her some of what she wanted, you know. And it was kind of a back and forth a lot. I would challenge it. I would get kind of shot down. I would get told why that wasn't correct, and then, you know, go back to being, well, okay, whatever. I'll just do it to keep the peace. Probably the biggest turning point then was a couple of months after that. So the retreat is 2 times a year. And I remember thinking that I was going to have her go to the other retreat on her own. You know, she could satisfy some of the things that she didn't feel she was getting with me. You know, she can sow her wild oats, you know, go crazy, and then come back to me. And within that time frame, her other partner also left. She ended up leaving in the middle of the night on her birthday. And Jessie was at my place, which was now our place, because she was then paying half my rent. But her partner left about 7 months into our relationship. And she had left this wonderful letter outlining how abusive she was. And I didn't get it at the time. I was like, no, you're not abusive. You're just this. And she broke down at it for a couple of weeks. She neared suicidal. She was very anxious and very depressed. And I remember just like taking care of her, but I couldn't take care of her properly. You know, whatever I did wasn't the way she needed to be comforted. You know, she wouldn't tell me how to comfort her, but she would shoot me down and tell me that I just didn't do it correctly. I couldn't do it correctly. And in that time, she started pushing again for poly. And I was like, but we agreed not to be, you know. We agreed, and now that your other partner's gone, now it can be just us. And she pushed for poly again, and I told her I can't do that. And we fought for, well, we didn't really fight, but we went back and forth on it for another month or so. And the week before she left for the retreat on her own was probably the biggest moment of our whole relationship, because she finally agreed to it. We were laying in bed, and we'd been talking about it. I think I was crying about something, and she was crying, and it was very emotional. And she's like, well, what exactly is it that you want? And I said, well, what I want is at retreat, we can do whatever we want. You know, we have free reign. And then maybe we do a couple kink events a year, you know, that are, you know, talked about and agreed upon ahead of time. And other than that, I want it to be just us. And we were talking about it, and she said, you know what? Let's do it. You know, and I remember being like, oh, my God, like, this is it. We cracked the code. You know, we figured out a compromise, and this is, we cracked the code, you know. And she was like, this is the end of an era, you know, like, very dramatic about it, and which was fine, because that was what I've been fighting for the entire relationship. At this point, we were together like 8.5 months, and for 8.5 months, I've been basically fighting for just this. And it was huge. I told all my friends, you know, I was like, oh my God, it happened. I told my therapist, you know, like, I was very proud of it, you know. And so she went to the retreat. It was, you know, again, the 4-day retreat. And I kind of, you know, I had a good time kind of without her a little bit. I went out with friends, and my dad invited me to this party that he was going to. And I remember enjoying myself. But at one point, I did get in trouble. Oh, I'm sorry, 2 points I got in trouble. One was that I went to that party that my dad invited me to, but I didn't tell her that I was going. Huge deal. You know, I disobeyed the one rule that she had when she was out of the house. And so I apologized that I was sorry and told her when I was leaving. And then the other one is during that time, it was a Friday the 13th. And on Friday the 13th, I usually go and get cheap tattoos because they have really good deals. And the one that I got, it was kitschy. It was very small. It was a heart with butt in it. You know, it was like lacy underwear or whatever. I don't know. It was very kitschy. But I had texted, I don't know, like 5 or 6 people, just be like, is this trashy? Is this too, you know, whatever. But they're like, no, it's cute. Go for it. So I did. I ended up getting it. And it was not okay. I heard for 2 weeks how trashy it was. And at one point, I remember telling her, listen, like, I know how you feel about the tattoo, but it's on my body. You know, like, can you just calm down? I know that you don't like it, but I remember she even said, because 2 of the people that I had asked about it were friends of ours. Like, were originally her friends, but were my friends. And they said, go for it. And she's like, don't worry, I already yelled at the girls for telling you to do it. And I was like, Jesus. You know, it's all connected. You know, it's all just, we didn't have a free moment where I wasn't doing something wrong, I guess. But after she got back from the retreat, she was quiet, she was very reserved and very distant for about a week. And, you know, sometimes that can happen when you go to something that's fully submersive with the BDSM and kink community. When you come out, there's sometimes a drop that you have afterwards, like a mental drop, where you kind of have to get back to real life. It's kind of a harder adjustment. And so I expected that because that happened the first time too, you know. So I was prepared for that, and I was giving her space, giving her time. And in that week, I remember telling her, you know, that I was ready for her to come back, but when she was ready, she'd be ready. But she was also talking a lot to people from the retreat, like people that she had met or people that she got to see again. which is fine because we both do that, talk to the people that we met. But she was talking a lot. Like, she was texting all the time. And at a couple of points, I remember telling her, like, that I was feeling very insecure because I felt like I wasn't enough. You know, I remember saying, I know we agreed to be monogamous, but I feel like at a certain point, I'm not going to be enough for you anymore. You know, in the future, if we get married, if we have kids, I feel like you're going to be so bored with us that you're going to have to go off to find something else because we're just not enough for you. And I think I had this conversation with her twice in that week. And I would cry because I was telling her, you know, very real fears that I had and insecurities that I had. But she made sure that that's not how it's going to be. You know, you really are enough for me. Like, she would hold me while I cried. Like, it was that much of a fear for me. And a couple of weeks later, I got a little tipsy, which is always the time that I get brave. And I remember asking her, like, questioning her about the people that she talked to from the retreat. And it was revealed that it wasn't completely innocent talking. And I was like, well, that goes against what we agreed upon. Like, we just talked about that a couple of weeks ago and you agreed on it. You know, like, it was the most important moment of our entire relationship and you're already feeling like it's okay to just dismiss it. And she was very nonchalant about it even. Like, she was like, yeah, no, pretty much everything that I said that day was bullshit. And I was, because I had never seen that side of her. Like, the completely nonchalant, just blatant, yeah, I just didn't care. You know, and I remember being so disillusioned. And I was also under the influence of alcohol. So there was a lot of just quiet. And then anger. You know, I yelled and I asked questions. And basically she said, well, you asked the right questions. And I was like, but that's not how a relationship is supposed to work. You know, like, you should feel like you can tell me anything. Or you should feel like I deserve to know these things, not just because I asked the correct question. And so I was fuming. And I remember going to work that next day and just fuming. And for 3 days, I contemplated, what am I going to do? Like, am I going to break up with her? Am I going to try with her? I had already told her that it was a deal breaker if she didn't start going to therapy with me. I was like, there's no way I could either make a therapy appointment or I'm breaking up with you right now, which she did. But the next 3 days, I went through every single scenario in my head. And after that third day, I decided that we were going to break up. And that was the first attempt at breaking up with her. After, I think we were together 9 months, I want to say, 9 and a half. And I was doing it, and I was at work, and so was she. And I was telling her, you know what, like, I think that's it. You know, I don't think we're ever going to find a middle ground. You want to be poly, I want to be monogamous, and clearly this is not going to work. And her first round of text was dismissive. Yeah, I guess, whatever. And then when I wasn't changing my mind, it was anger. And then she started using my ex-wife against me. And then after all that, I was still set. So she came home, and I'd been sobbing all day. She'd been sobbing, I guess. And she got down on her hands and knees, and she said, you're the love of my life. You know, without you, I'm never going to get married. I'm never going to have kids. I want this to work. And I said, I don't think it can. But she said, what if we just find something, one thing that is, you know, somewhere in the middle? And so what she proposed was for her to have a sub, one sub, because up until then she had started pushing for all kinds of subs. But she said, what if I just have one sub? I said, well, I can think about it. So we started to work on what this would mean, what the boundaries would be, what I could be comfortable with, what I wouldn't be comfortable with. We started going to therapy and talking about it there. And we agreed on that. So we agreed that she would have one person that would be her submissive, that at first would not be sexual because I could not handle it. but could eventually become. And it would mostly just be a power dynamic. It wouldn't be a relationship. It wouldn't be sexual yet. It would just be the power dynamic, which plenty of people are into. So it shouldn't be hard to find somebody who would be willing to do this. And she, at that point, had 5 people on the line, so I was like, pick one, So she picked the sub, we picked the agreement, and I was working on being comfortable with it. So all of our therapy sessions were basically bloodbaths, on either one side or the other or both. We were just, basically therapy was this one place that we could just say exactly what we were thinking to each other without any repercussions. And we did. And I remember I started becoming disillusioned after the realization that the most important moment was a complete lie. And I started slowly disillusioning after that. I think that's the term. And then every once in a while, I would have a wake-up call again. And the first one happened, so we had a Friendsgiving where all of our friends come, and I cooked for 12 hours, and we got tables, and I was so excited about, this is one of my dreams, is to host family parties, basically. And I cooked from, 7 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And throughout the whole time, she would help chop things, or she would help do this or that. And I remember every single dish, there was something wrong with it, when I was cooking it. Don't overcook the potatoes if the mashed potatoes aren't going to turn out. Or if you use this, it's going to taste like crap. Or it was just little things here and there. We had to make a last trip to Walmart for a couple of last-minute things. And right before I was going, I went to the bathroom, and I came out, and she was on her phone at the counter. And when she saw me, she turned it off real quick. And before she turned it off, I saw a little bit, but she was talking to the sub, which wasn't against the rules. She could absolutely talk to the sub. That's within her rights. It was weird that she had turned it off so quick. And I kind of let it go for a minute. And as we were getting ready, I said, I just have one request for tonight. If it's okay, if you could not talk to the sub. You can be on your phone, that's fine. But this is for friends and family. And I would like it to be just us. And she flipped out. She acted like I was telling her not to be on her phone at all, which we were also struggling with because she was on her phone all the time. But I told her, I was like, you can be on your phone the whole time, the entire time. Just don't talk to the sub today. You can let her know, hey, this is family time, and that would be it. And I know that the sub would have been fine with it, but she wasn't. And she said, well, that's not as interesting. And I said, well, that effing sucks. And I marched to the car, waited for her fuming. She agreed to it, and she stopped talking to the sub. And I remember it just didn't sit with me right. And the next day, I said, I'm gonna ask to see her phone today, because it didn't sit right. Because before she turned off her phone, I saw a heart. I was like, well, that doesn't seem quite right. And so I was like, I'm gonna ask to see her phone. And right before we went to bed, she accidentally left her phone in the bathroom. So I looked at it for the 30 seconds that I had. There was enough incriminating evidence that I felt fine in asking for it because I did actually want to see it. And we got in bed, and she's like, well, if there's something on your mind, what's wrong? I was like, well, let me see your phone. And she just stopped. She's like, why? I was like, just let me see it. That's within my rights. I'm allowed to do that. Let me see your phone. And she just kept asking why. I was like, if you're not doing anything wrong, just prove it. Just prove it. It's not that hard. And she kept denying it. And I told her, I was like, if you don't let me see your phone, I'm leaving this house tonight. I'm not staying here tonight if you don't give me your phone. I was that mad. And she's like, well, I would go. I said, you would risk our entire relationship and your sub because you don't want me to see your phone because you're not doing anything wrong. So I said, tell me what you're doing wrong. She said, well, sometimes she sends me pictures. I was like, yep, that's against the rules. Anything else? He says, well, we talk about our day. We talk about our day. I was like, yep, that's partner behavior. Anything else? He's like, no, that's it. I was like, okay, so let me see it. He's like, but I told you. Just a struggle back and forth. And our therapy session before this was probably like a week before this. We talked about the difference between partner and sub, like the actual definition between partner and sub. And I had told her, I want it to be a sub, not a partner, because a partner would be someone that you lean to for emotional support. Somebody that is like ever present, somebody that's important, somebody that's a partner. Whereas a sub, it's a power dynamic. You tell them what to do and how to do it, and they prove it, or they have punishments for X, Y, Z, and there's a dynamic to it, which I was fine with because I didn't want that dynamic outside of the bedroom because I was in the 24/7. But we had that conversation with the therapist of what the difference was. And when I actually got to see her phone, it was 100% partner behavior. They were talking about their days. She was calling her honey. She called her when she was depressed in the bathtub in the other room, not talking to me, but called her. And I told her, I was like, this is exactly what the therapist told you was partner behavior. Like, why do you think that that's okay? She said, well, I'm not allowed to sleep with her. How else am I supposed to keep her? I said, that is not my problem. If you can't keep a sub, that doesn't make you a dom then. Like, that's not my problem. The problem is that everything that you said you weren't going to do, you are doing. And she says, well, it's emotional manipulation because I can't sleep with her. I was like, I don't care what you say it is. To this girl, you're calling her when you're depressed. You're asking about her day. You're calling her sweetie and honey and sending her heart. I don't care what you're saying it is, but that's what it is. And the next day was attempt number 2 to break up with her because I was just so tired. I told her, I said, I can't keep waiting for the next thing that you don't realize is going to hurt me. And she says, just give me one more chance. I said, I gave you 3, and you still continue to hurt me. She said, just give me one more. I said, fine. I gave her one more. And, there was nothing really big that happened after that, but the weekend that I did end up breaking up with her, I couldn't do it anymore because I did end up meeting the sub, who was a lovely person. I have literally no ill feelings against her at all. She's wonderful. She does exactly what she's supposed to do, and she's a great person. But seeing them interact together, I could tell that Jessie still did not get the point of partner versus sub. And she made a show like she did, but I knew, like, in the way that she looked at her and the way that she felt, that she just wanted Polly. And I was just exhausted by that point. I was so exhausted. And the next day we went to a wedding, and I got sufficiently drunk. And it was a very, very, very fancy wedding. Like, it was probably the fanciest event I've ever been to in my life. And I don't come from that at all. So, rationally for her, she would correct the things that I did, or the way that I was standing, or the way that I grabbed food off of the appetizer plate. Like, it was just little things. I think I just remember just being like, I can't keep doing this. And we ended up having a huge fight that night over sex, actually, which was ridiculous. But because for the last couple of weeks, she'd been telling me that I was being selfish, like sexually, that I was putting my needs above hers, and that I was just not sensitive to her, which is pretty much exactly what she was doing, but just projecting it on me. And I just remember being so fed up that the next day she told me to leave the house because we were at her mom's house. She told me the next morning to leave the house because she needed space. I said, that's fine. And then later that day I texted her back and I said, listen, I know you want space, but I just want to let you know, like, I think you're right. We do need space. I said, we can't do this anymore. All I need from you is half of the break lease fee, and that's all I'm going to ask from you. But I can't do it anymore. And her response was not to talk about the fact that I was breaking up with her. but was to tell me that I was being selfish again and showing that I didn't respect her boundaries because she asked for space. She said nothing about the breakup at that point, just that I clearly didn't respect her boundaries because I was texting her. And I just remember just being so sure like that was the right choice. And that next day we did end up breaking up our relationship. I had a therapy appointment like halfway through it, and before I left for my therapy appointment, she acted very nonchalant, very like unfeeling. You know, like it was a business transaction. Like, what are we going to do with the apartment? Who's going to stay? Where are we going to sleep? All of this. And I remember tearing up at one point, and she said, I don't understand why you're crying. It's not like we lost anything big. I said, of course we did. We're breaking up. And it was just a slap in the face. But, you know, I left for my appointment. I came back, and she, that's when all of her emotions came. And always for her, the first one was anger. You know, how could you do this? What is wrong with you? You know, clearly you couldn't try. All of this. And then it was poor me. There was a lot of pity, like, oh, another person who left me. You're just like all the others. It was a big, long, drawn-out process. And I remember I did feel bad, but I remember thinking, no, this is the right decision. And so after we broke up, we did live together for another month and a half. But she was rarely home. She would come home for like a day or two, and then she'd leave for about 6 or 7. I don't know where she went. I don't really care to know where she went. But for the first couple of weeks, we were pretty cordial. You know, we were nice to each other. You know, it was a very nice, it felt nice and wrapped up in a bow for a while. But then I told her that I was going to break the lease in 2 months. I was giving us 2 months, and then I was going to break the lease. And she freaked out because friends don't break leases. And, you know, I'm not giving her enough time. After that, she decided we were absolutely nothing to each other because friends don't break leases. And I remember being heartbroken about it because we had been so cordial and friendly. And then for it to just be done because I made the agreement that in 2 months we would leave the house. You know, and it was just, everything was my fault and everything was just incorrectly done. And I was just so over it, you know. But I remember I did tear up for a while, and I was crying. She's like, I don't understand why you're crying. And I said, we're nothing to each other. We were something, and now we're nothing. That warrants emotion. And she's like, well, this is what you wanted. And it was all just thrown back at me. And 3 days later, she informed me that she was not going to pay rent and that she was going to be gone by the end of the month. So when I gave her 2 months, she gave me 28 days to get out of my house. Because, you know, it had to end on her note. And I figured it out. You know, I wasn't worried about that. I was trying to give her the time. But she just wanted to have that last stab, you know. And a couple of weeks later, she packed up her stuff and she said, well, you're never going to see or hear from me again. And I remember I was out drinking with one of my friends one night, or we were staying and drinking, and I had found this article that I had saved probably halfway through our relationship that I had never opened, and it was 64 Signs of Emotional Abuse. And I remember being, drunk off my behind with my best friend. And I remember going through the list, and of those 64 signs, I remember being like, there's like 45 or 50 that I experienced regularly. And like, not just like, oh yeah, that happened, but for each one, I would tell my friend, no, remember this time. Or like, I could give you 2 or 3 stories about each of the signs. And I just remember thinking, oh yeah, that's not right. And after that, I started doing a lot of research on, emotional abuse, and I found a lot on narcissistic abuse. And it's like I could have written every single article that I read. And it was kind of a wake-up moment. It was just, I have a name to this thing that I just went through. And it's not just me that went through it. It's not just me that fell for it. It's something that happened to me, and it was hard for me to separate that from something I let happen. But finally there was like a community, you know, and there was articles and there was stories to be told. And there's a vocabulary to it. And I think that really started my healing process, is realizing that I could put a name to this thing that I had just went through, you know?
And so did you, once you started learning all of those things as part of your healing process, did you continue to see a therapist and work through these things?
I did. I'd actually been going to a therapist throughout the relationship. I started seeing a therapist probably about 6 months before I met her, actually, or before I started dating her. But it was mostly working on things that I had personally. But after I finally had a name, I remember telling my therapist too, before doing all the research, I remember asking my therapist, do you think that Jesse was abusive? And, you know, as a therapist, you can't just say yes. You know, you have to figure it out on your own, you know, and she's kind of like, well, maybe, what do you think? And it was a short conversation at that point. But after I did the research, I came back and I said, Jesse was abusive. And I was telling her about the articles, and I was telling her about the things I learned. And we did get to actually work through it. And we did get to figure out, okay, where do we go from here emotionally and situationally? Because, you know, I was out of an apartment. I was out of my depth of understanding for a minute. And I did get a chance to work through it.
How do you feel about the community that you were in and the lines that were blurred? And do you feel that if you weren't, you know, in that community, or, you know, the polyamorous community, the BDSM community, those are different, that would you have been susceptible to what happened without that stuff?
I do think that I was susceptible at the point that I was at after leaving my ex-wife.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think, and again, I love the kink community, and I do think that there's great things that can be done with poly. I don't knock that at all. But I do think that that environment is a little bit more conducive to these kinds of relationships and these kinds of personalities, because they're used for the wrong reason. With Jessie, a lot of it is, I believe, that she in her head has no true boundaries between BDSM and real life. Like, for example, I remember having the conversation with her and saying, so if I came home one day and decided I wanted to dress up really nice and make dinner and bring you a beer on the couch, I would think, oh, I'm being a good girlfriend. You know, I'm doing good girlfriend things. But in her mind, it would be, oh, what a good sub. Even though it has absolutely nothing to do with BDSM or kink. Just in her mind, I think she's enmeshed them so much that in that environment, being a narcissist, she's in a better environment to find the kinds of people that are susceptible to it, if that makes sense.
And I'm not going to get into that. I guess, you know, I'm sure I could further probe into that community and the percentages of,
sure.
of narcissistic personalities, and things along those lines. But, you know, so after you came to all these realizations and your healing process continued, I guess, where are you right now?
Well, I was very fortunate, and it was not supposed to happen. But about halfway through my healing process, I accidentally met the love of my life. And I think that she's a wonderful person. She's very much straight edge, pretty much non-kink, very vanilla. But she's went through so much in her life and has gone through so much and come out on the healthy side that she has a way of speaking when I'm kind of reverting a little bit, when I am either feeling down on myself about what I let happen or if I'm talking about something, like an instance with my ex that had happened, she is able to bring me kind of to the forefront of it with the kind of vocabulary that she has from her healing. And also she has a background in psychology, which is so helpful. But she has helped me a lot realize how strong I am and realize that I did go through something that is very hard to get out of, and I did it on my own. And I also, I realized that I am the person that I know I am from before my ex and before my ex-wife even. Like, there is a person here that I completely lost, and I started writing again. I started reading again. I listen to a lot of podcasts now. I'm back into the things that I realized bring me joy. I got enrolled in school again. I'm going to school for social work, actually. I'm almost done with my associates finally after the break that I took. And I finally feel comfortable for the first time in my life. I feel like I'm at a place that the past doesn't define me anymore, and that I am the main character of my story, if that makes sense. And I mean, I still have a little bit to go. I still get flashbacks every once in a while, and I do sometimes miss the person that I thought I knew. And it's not that I missed her being with her, but I miss knowing that person that she was, that I thought she was, rather. But I'm at probably one of the healthiest points in my life.
So you're deriving your self-worth and self-esteem from yourself and not putting it in the hands of other people?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm finally relying on myself and relying on my thoughts and emotions to guide me where I actually want to go, rather than the codependent that used other people to kind of guide where I was leading. And it feels really good.
And were there any like practices or things that you had to do to help you get there, or just like this gradual process of slowly believing in who you are again and slowly discovering one thing by one thing? Like, oh, I took up writing again. That makes me feel good. I'm going to continue that. I like doing that. That is who I am. Or not that is who I am. That is something that gives me pleasure. That came from me.
Yeah, the biggest things for me was just investing in the things that I knew brought me joy, and also writing, even though that's something that does give me joy. Writing helped me a lot. Like, I started journaling just kind of independently, and I looked up self-guided journals. I found this one, which is it's kind of woo-woo, but it's really good. It's like a meditation journal. Like little exercises, poetry exercises and stuff, like things that would kind of direct all that chaotic energy that I have, the chaotic thoughts that I have, and kind of funnel them into this medium of writing. Because when you're writing, you can only write one thing at a time. And so it kind of directs your thoughts. Like, if I have all these thoughts bouncing around in my head, if I start writing, I can only focus on one at a time. And so getting it out on paper helps me a lot. And also it helps me understand how I'm feeling when I'm feeling overwhelmed. So that was really, really big for me, was investing in my writing again, and actually using it and guiding it in a way that would help me center myself.
So before we end off our show, is there any words of wisdom you have for everyone out there?
The hardest thing for me was the distinction between this is something that happened to me and this is something that I let happen to me. The biggest thing that I can say is you have to realize that you're not at fault for what someone else did to you. You're not at fault for letting it happen to you, because they know exactly how to do it, and you're not alone in that mindset. But that's the biggest thing for me that I had to kind of come out of, and that's what's going to make you the most free, is taking yourself from the equation.
Well, Betty, I want to thank you for telling your story and sharing your story with us today. It's been a pleasure. And I'm sorry that you went through all of this, but it sounds like you have done a lot of work and a lot of healing, and your whole entire process that you've gone through, I think, will help a lot of people. So I really appreciate you talking with me today.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to kind of express what I did go through, and if it helps even one person, I mean, it's worth it.
Then you did your job. So I thank you for that. And for everyone else out there who is listening, I hope you have a good night.